What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the video, and make sure you leave a comment. We got a good one today. We're doing an interview with one of the dudes that was highlighted in that Dopesick book. I think it eventually becomes a Net Flix show, or so it's on cable television. But you know what? I'm gonna let Spencer talk about that. Spencer, tell the people who you are, where you're from, and talk a little bit about that Dopesick book and the series and how all that came about.
Okay, I'm from Roanoke, Virginia, and personally, since I've been 15 years old, I have 44 personal friends, not acquaintances, personal friends that I actually could tell you their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister that have died from drugs or drug-related violence. It has hit my area, which is a good area. It hit it all at once, and from the time of 14, I got into it. But basically, there were two older kids that got 10 kids hooked on it. They got 3 kids hooked on it. It all happened at the Ramada Inn, and from there, Cave Spring, Hidden Valley, Patrick Henry. Out of those 3 schools, 44 people my age have died. And Beth Macy, the writer of the book Dopesick, she did a series of interviews with me in 2011. She actually learned the word dopesick from me. She kept asking me, what does that mean? You do so much dope, you get sick? And I said, no, it's actually the opposite. It's when you ran out and you get sick. And it is a New York Times bestseller now. About 50 pages of it's about my story. And, it talks about how a lot of addiction started in the medicine cabinet of people's houses and just bringing awareness to that.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got involved. I mean, how did you start getting high? Did you start selling drugs? I mean, tell the people how that works.
It's a very interesting story in my case because the kids who were 2 years ahead of me in school were notorious for doing stuff to the kids that were younger. They got arrested. There were many cases. Well, I saw there was this one group of kids that nobody messed with. Well, they were selling weed to the seniors and everybody else. They're known as the tough kids, the little drug dealer kids. So I hooked in with them. One of the kids' older brothers was giving them a couple pounds a week to sell. So I started hanging out with them. And the day that pretty much everything changed and I never got messed with was a couple of the guys who were known for picking on people were coming over to buy something from me. I said, dude, what do I do? He might try to rob me. And he gave me a piece. He gave me a piece. He said, here, use this. So I got these clown pants, these big old sweatpants. I look like somebody from an 80s rap video carrying this piece in my pocket. And sure enough, he says, what's to keep me from beating the piss out of you and taking everything you got? And shaking like a leaf, I put the piece in his belly button and I said this. And after that, rumor started around, oh, Spencer's a bad dude. And, I wasn't, but.
You get involved in the drug game and eventually you end up going to federal prison based off of an overdose, right? Let's talk a little bit about that because a lot of people that are out there selling dope right now, they don't realize that, when you sell someone some dope, they get high, they die. A lot of times, and I do legal work and I've done a couple cases like this, what they do is the cops go in there, a lot of times they check them phones. Who was the last person that they called? What are the text messages saying? And usually, unfortunately for drug dealers and unfortunately for those addicted, they start messaging, but yo, I need 2 of those or I need 4 of those. And they show up, they get it, they overdose, they die. The cops check that phone. They know who sold them the dope. Now they're looking at what? A mandatory 20 years?
It does not matter whether the person lives or dies. If they have medical response that comes, if I sell you a $10 bag of drugs and EMS responds, it is the same mandatory minimum of 20 years, whether you live or whether you die. And they can't go below 20, so you got to do 17 on that. And that's something that people don't realize. You could be the smallest time drug dealer, sell a $10 bag, and somebody could freak out. And according to how EMS responded, that's considered an overdose, which is 20 years if the feds pick it up. So
when you get arrested, right? You get arrested, you're charged. How old are you at the time?
At the time, well, it was around 2010. So I was about 21, 22 at the time.
You're 21, 22. Tell us the story. This person overdoses where? In your house?
Well, what had led to this was I was actually selling drugs. I was a full-on drug dealer, and I got set up one day with Vice. The Vice came, the Vice got and I said, okay, take me to jail. They said, we're going to leave you out. We're going to catch you more and rank up charges so you never get out. And they let me go. I went into hiding. I was on the run for probably about 6 months. So since I was determined not to add any additional charges, I didn't want to get put away for decades, like they said. The lesser of all evils seemed like this drug dealer and her boyfriend said, if we come live with you, we'll give you drugs every day. That'll be the rent. So I figured I don't have to scheme. I don't have to scam. I don't have to rob, steal. I just let them have a room. Can't get in trouble for that, right? And ultimately, what ends up happening is one night there's a knock at the door. This is on record. I had no part in inviting this person over. Nothing to do with it. I open the door. The person comes in, gets the drugs, takes them home and overdoses. The same night that happened, a guy who I had met the day before, who was the dealer's childhood friend, overdoses in the bedroom that she's renting the apartment. I do CPR on this guy. Her and the other people in the apartment are wanting to drag him out in the hallway and just leave him, call the cops, but don't have the cops come to the I'm like, he's going to die. You've got to call them now. There's no time to drag him out in the hallway. So I don't know what I'm doing, but I seen it on TV. So I start doing CPR mouth to mouth on this dude. Kept him alive till the ambulance got there. And whenever he woke up, I'm handcuffed, and I said, you owe me when I get out. Your friend wanted to drag you out in the hall and I saved your life. He said, you didn't save anything. And the EMS guy said, you idiot. He didn't save you. We saved you, but he did keep you alive until we got here. Grow up is what he said to him. I saw his facial expression changed. He looked at his childhood friend who wanted to drag him out in the hall, and all she could do was hang her head. And we went to jail, and there was something, I knew I was going to go through tremendous withdrawals, right? I was doing tremendous amount of heroin. So this is kind of a funny thing. I didn't want to go through the withdrawals. So when I got to the jail, I made myself throw up on the floor, and then I started shaking. I knew that they would respond by putting an IV in me, which they did. And they shot me up with Halidol. I woke up in the bubble room, the suicide room. They didn't have me in a suicide suit. They were worried I was going to die, so I still had the jumpsuit. And I basically slept off most of the overdose by that little fake out. But
so now you go into federal court, though. Eventually you're in federal court. What's it like for a young man to go into federal court and they start talking about a 20-year mandatory minimum?
Well, the first thing, before we even got there, the lawyer came in. He says, don't talk. They have these rooms bugged. And he shows some stuff down on a piece of paper. I'm like, what are you talking about? They have the room bugged. Does this name look familiar to you? I'm like, yeah, I know that name. What about this name? I'm like, I think that's the one guy. It's like, okay. Some really bad stuff. This is some serious stuff. I'm going to do what I can. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And, I'm in for actually being a drug dealer, but the charges that I'm getting were for letting somebody have a room in my apartment. And it's crazy because you get these U.S. Marshals, these big old jacked up guys, these guys that look like they jerk off the roadhouse to come and get you. And they're talking crap to you the whole way there. Yeah, I mean, just big old burly guys, and they talk. And but the only good thing about it was I got a hamburger and some French fries in the federal courthouse, but I couldn't even eat it.
Let me stop you, because when they start thinking you got a hamburger and French fries, other people are gonna be thinking when they're watching the video, man. Why did you get the hamburger and French fries, my boy?
They don't have a cafeteria in the federal courthouse, so they have to get food from an outside location. And they bring it to everybody in the holding cells. The guy who was in the cell next to me was a counterfeiter. We had a conversation for a good bit.
Hold on. You weren't the only guy eating burgers and fries that day.
Do what now?
You were not the only guy eating burgers and fries.
No. Everybody on the whole, they do this every time to this day. There's a local little place beside there. I mean, it sounded nice, but couldn't eat none of it. Sick to my stomach, ready to throw up. I'm like, what's going on? Because they don't tell you what's going on. They come get you, and it's the feds, and you're like, what did I do? I quit all that a long time ago, you know?
All right, so keep going. The counterfeit guy.
So yeah, I have a conversation with him just about what's going on, and he's asking me about what's going on, and I'm like, well, you know, I said at one point I actually was selling drugs, but I think I'm in here for when I wasn't selling drugs. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, at my apartment, I let somebody, you know, have a room to actually sell dope. I said, I quit selling dope. I didn't want to get any more charges. And we just talk back and forth, you know, before we go in there. And ultimately end up going into the bond hearing for this. And the judge literally looked at the prosecutor and asked, why is he being charged? Because what they were charging me for and what they'd ultimately found out was that I was not the person who was selling the drugs, that it just took place in my apartment. And he asked the prosecutor, why are you charging him for? Wait, don't answer that question. And then carried on. And there was one DEA agent who really didn't like me. And there were multiple times that he picked me up in the car to transport me, talked to me like a dog the whole way there, told me that I was going to spend the next decades of my life in prison the whole time, which I'm pretty sure everything that he did was not allowed. And what was really weird was the day that my case concluded, he was taken off the DEA and put on county vice. There's some weird things that happen. There was a whole lot of weird stuff that happened, but him and this other guy, this giant guy who didn't speak, he just looked angry. He told me that the DEA agent told me that his daughter was a prostitute. She had hepatitis C, that she was out doing drugs, that he hated drug dealers, and that because of people like me, this whole thing's being fueled and everything else. And he just was determined. I mean, and pushed it. And even the prosecutor of the bond hearing was like, didn't really have any objections with me getting bond, but this one DEA agent stood up and did everything he could to make sure it didn't happen. But they ultimately, and the judge, have you seen Tommy Boy with Chris Farley, where he says he feels like he's going to drive off a bridge embankment and he pulls his hair?
I'm not a big movie watcher, but go ahead.
Well, the judge pulls his hair like it's sticking up every direction, like he's like debating because it's a serious charge, but he's like wondering why I'm there. And it was a 45-minute to an hour bond hearing where he's like conflicted on whether or not to give me bond. And despite the DEA agent doing his best to keep me from getting it, he ended up giving me bond.
So you end up getting bond, but eventually you get sentenced and you go to federal prison. That's kind of where I want to go, right? You end up copping out to a lesser included offense. You end up with what, an 8-year sentence?
Yes.
You end up with an 8-year sentence, and now you're going to federal prison. How old are you at the time that you're sentenced?
Well, it was, I'm trying to do the math. I went in 2012. They gave me 5 months to self-report. I was doing drug court. I actually graduated drug court from when I was an actual drug dealer. I got a year in a program for when I was a drug dealer for a deal that on the record, I didn't have any part in, didn't profit off of. The only thing I had involved in it was it took place at my apartment. I got an 8-year sentence. And when he said 96 months, you know, I'm pretty good at math. You know, at the time that all the stuff was happening with the dealer in my apartment, I was going to college. I was keeping it together mildly. I was still a full-blown addict. But when they say 96 months, I'm like, okay, how long is that? Well, 120 is 10, so it's less than that. I'm trying to, you can't calculate. My blood pressure went so high, my ears popped, and I'm like trying to figure it out. My family was in denial. They didn't believe I was going to prison. I'm like, I'm going to prison. I've been federally charged. I'm going to prison. My lawyer asked for zero. He said that since the whole time I've been out on bond, I was the speaker at drug court, did perfect. And he's like, and to be honest, it was just his apartment. They basically were saying if the drugs weren't sold in my apartment, they wouldn't have got sold and the guy wouldn't have died. And I am very sorry that it's awful that he died, but like, I didn't arrange this for profit off of it whatsoever. So they asked for 15, and ended up getting 8. But the prosecution asked 15.
Now you're going to federal prison, right? You go to
Yeah.
You end up going to FCI Petersburg in Virginia.
I went
Right?
to Petersburg low, but I ended up at the medium security.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that here in a minute. So you go
Yeah.
to the low, right? What's the low like when you walk? Are you nervous walking into federal prison?
Absolutely. And there's a hilarious story. I stayed completely 100% off of drugs every day that I was on bond. I had a couple years clean. It was the first time I was on bond for 2 years. It was extended, so I was allowed to finish drug court, in which time I practiced Kempo karate 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, the entire time. I also took a college corrections class to prepare. So have you seen the movie Get Hard?
Yes. So
It was like Get Hard.
you're taking these classes to learn about prison. You were that afraid, that nervous?
Well, we didn't have YouTubers like you. We had Fleece Johnson and the Alabama turned out stories. I was like, ain't nobody getting my butt, you know. So I went in there and I trained karate 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. I'm like, I got to get ready. Ain't gonna get me. Ain't gonna get my butt. Ain't gonna happen. Mm-mm. No, I was scared. I can't lie. I watch these. Back then, YouTube was not what it is. Back then, it was horrifying. I was scared to death. I'm not gonna lie.
So you think you might be going to prison and all the hold on, all the prison movies that you watched, you're thinking, man, this ain't gonna happen to me. So you're learning karate, you're up there kung fuing it, doing all kinds of wild things, huh?
4 hours a day, 6 days a week, every day. I went to every seminar I could. I went to an Enzo Gracie seminar, Matt Sarah seminar. I went to all of them. Anytime that they were in the area, I went to one of their seminars. That was my whole job, was protect your butt. Protect your butt.
Wow, bro. So this story took a turn for, it is what it is, right? But did you actually learn how to fight or what?
I did, but I learned that the half-speed self-defense sequences that they do are absolutely worthless. And what ultimately ended up saving me, which today I'm a judo brown belt under an Olympian named Tarek Moner. I've had a brown belt for 2 years. I'm a jiu-jitsu blue belt under a world champion named Paulo Santana. I boxed with Scott Cujo Sigmund. He was Roy Jones Jr. Do what now?
Roy Jones.
He was Roy Jones Jr.'s most recent opponent prior to Tyson. He went the distance with him, and he even won a few rounds in Roy Jones' hometown. I changed to those three arts because of what didn't work from karate in there. But what we did in karate was we did do basic grappling 1 day a month. Very basic, but we sparred every time. And the stand-up sparring was pretty good. It got reasonably good with, clinch fighting, hands, feet. But they have these self-defense sequences like grab my wrist. That stuff doesn't work. It never works out. That stuff got me hit. And then whenever you get a hold of the person and whenever that's what ended up saving me. That's why my belief in grappling is so high, was because I had such a primitive, basic level of grappling, but ultimately it is what worked more than the karate worked, which is why I changed to what I changed in. But I went, absorbed every bit of it before going in. Something I was going to say though about the first day going in, you're going to turn yourself in. You don't go through receiving. You just show up at prison. You're like, hi guys, ready to go to prison. You're going to have a heart attack. You know what I mean? You just walk into prison, you've got your life right. So my mom got me to go to the doctor. She's like, you're going to have a breakdown. So she got me to the doctor. They gave me some Xanax that I took the week before. Well, there's no reason to save any. And the closer we get to the prison, I'm having a heart attack. So I take these extra Xanax that I had. I haven't done drugs in 2 years. I have zero tolerance to anything. When I get there, I'm a little intoxicated. When you have to say your name into the phone, you have to say to get it to register. Well, when I got to the prison, I thought, well, my enemies might know I'm here, so I don't want them to know I'm here. So I told everybody my name is Seth. My name's Spencer. For 5 years straight, and I sounded like Forrest Gump because of the Xanax. So for 5 years straight, I had to say, Seth Mumpower, to get the phone to work in that voice. So for 5 years, and I couldn't say Seth Mum, I had to yell it. So when people walk by me...
Hold on a second, Seth.
Yeah.
Spencer. So people that are watching, they need to know that in federal prison, you have to register your name or else you can't use your phone. So every time you get on the phone, you have to say your name in order for the phone to go through. So I want people to understand what you're talking about. But go
You
ahead.
get one chance too. You get one chance. And that one chance I got, I said it like a special needs person hollering, Seth Mumpower. So every time for 5 years straight, people would walk by that I talk normal, I talk regular. And every time they see me on the phone, I'm going, Seth Mumpower. And I have to do it 20 times because it won't register my name. So every time I get on the phone, everybody laughs at me for 5 years straight because I'm hollering like I have a mental illness or something, you know.
All good. So anyway, you're at the low. You get in there. You're moving around. Are you nervous when you're in there the first day watching people? Like,
for all the preparing I made so many mistakes the first day, and it was mostly because of the Xanax. The first thing I did was I walked in a TV room. I didn't know it was an all-black TV room. Now, when I went to federal prison at this time, I'm used to a different life, a different culture. My ex, who I was with at the time, was black, okay? So going in there, I'm not used to racial segregation, everything that I'm getting ready to get in. I walk into a black TV room, plop down in a seat. I'm talking like Forrest Gump, and they're just looking at me. And it ended up being okay there. But then I got approached by this group of guys. One guy's about 6'8", and they're trying to give me this stuff. Well, I heard you don't accept presents. Somebody going to get that butt, you accept something free. So I cuss them out. I say, nah, you ain't getting me. And they're like, nah, we do this for new inmates. We're a Christian group. We'd like to give you. I said, yeah, back. I'll smack you. Get away from me. I'm talking tough. Get me because I'm meeting with aggression. I heard it's what you got to do. Turned out they were just a nice Christian group trying to give me some hygiene items. But I embarrassed myself. We didn't become friends after
that. All right. So now you're over there. You don't have no issues. Are you starting to feel a week or two in? Like, man, this ain't as bad as I thought it was. Nobody's going to do nothing to me.
I still was paranoid for the first little bit. Now, the low, as opposed to the medium, there's 0 cameras. There's not one. And it's across from Fort Lee. It's an old military prison. There are cockroaches everywhere. I've woke up with cockroaches on my feet. Like they're not scared of the light. Like they're literally, and it's not like giant ones, but these little tiny roaches are everywhere in the whole low security prison, and there's no air conditioning. And I got there.
It's not like Joe's apartment back in the day on MTV. You kind of look like
Joe.
Oh,
yeah, yeah, I remember that one. But it's awful. I remember that. Yeah, that's way back. But it's off, and I got there. It's August 1st, 2012. It's like 102 degrees. I don't have a fan. It's 4 or 5 days before I go to commissary, and I won't take anything. I won't borrow anything from anybody because I heard the honey bun story. So I'm like, can't borrow anything. So I just suffered in silence. And, there was a couple people. You hear about the old man in prison who gives you advice. There was an old man who checked the call out for me every day. And do you want to explain what a call out sheet is?
You explain it.
It's basically an appointment sheet. It's has all the inmates' names, tell you where they're supposed to be. Well, this old man would check this sheet every day. And he'd be like, hey, youngster, you got this appointment today. And he really looked out. Everybody in there is like 40 to 50 years old. There's only one guy that's close to my age who's about 30. We become friends. He gets me. And they have weights there too, by the way. They have weights at the low security. They still do. And that was something I got really into after I went back. So 6 months.
You didn't stick with it, though. It don't look like you stuck with it.
Do what now?
It don't look like you stuck with it.
I'm joking, yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually was the pound for pound strongest white guy at Petersburg Low. At 170 pounds.
All right, okay. All right, now look, you were the strongest white dude at Petersburg, so now this is what we're going to tell
pound for pound.
Hold on, pound for pound, but we're going to get into what white dudes are there. A bunch of them are what? Offenders, SOs? Some people might call them chomos, so then a lot of them dudes ain't that big of dudes now.
Not true. The strongest guy that I beat for the strongest white in deadlift was a jacked steroid-using cop. A cop who was in for a hate crime. And it was a weird balance because a lot of people wanted me to beat the cop on deadlift, but then a lot of people, didn't want me to win because I had an all-black workout crew. It was guys from my area, guys I got along with. So that's who I worked out with. And I got videos on my channel, by the way. showing me deadlift. So, I'm not just blowing smoke or anything. I'm not going to talk about something, I can't back up. But, because people do tell stories about that, but I can prove that. But yeah, it's the low security with the sex offenders wasn't as bad, but the medium security, that was a different story. That was a different planet. 40%.
Okay,
Yeah.
so where was the 40%? In the low or in the medium?
Medium. And they filter to the low.
So now you end up going to the medium. Why do you leave the low? What happened?
Well, ultimately, what had happened, I use on pouches. Sorry, it's kind of like a little nicotine pouch. When my first 6 months at the low, I drank that tomato wine a little bit. I acted up a little bit, got in a few fights. Well, there was one big giant guy, and he was a former tough man boxer. And it's a dormitory setting. They're 4-quadrant, 0 cameras. You can scream as loud as you want from floor number 2, and they cannot hear you at floor number 1. It's not an open pod. So in one of the 4-man rooms, we got to playing around, and I was showing different pins. One of the pins is a judo pin called Kesagatami. And I put a few different people in it, and they couldn't get out. They're allowing me to put them in a fully locked pin, so it's not that impressive. Getting to that point to where you can do it. Well, this guy had heard that, and he came up there, and he got about an inch away from my face, and he said, "That stuff might have worked on them, it wouldn't work on me." And I was like, "Well, yeah, it would, this, that." And he says, "If I wanted to, I'd hold you down and you." And I told him, "F your mother." And he hit me. Well, he just said he'd hold me down and me. So I said, "F your mother." He hit me in the mouth harder than I've ever been hit in my whole entire life. Everything went white. My ears popped. And I went down to grab a leg, and he sprawled on top of me. So we're in this position. We're on the ground. I have both my arms wrapped around his leg. He has my body in a body lock. He swings hard to the left, hard to the right, and I time it. And on one of the swings, I roll with it, do kind of like a gator roll, and I end up in top side control. Now, I have my feet posted out. He's significantly bigger than me, but I have him in side control, and most people don't know how to escape a side pin. They just try to bridge up and kick instead of hipping into it. Well, we've done this in the school, so I've practiced this a whole lot. Well, I got a hold of his arm in what's called an Americana. I used a couple elbows into his jaw at first. He wasn't creating the exposure there. And I went until it actually popped. I heard pop, 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 and he's all right, all right, all right. And that was the end of that. Couldn't eat salty foods for 2 months after that. My lip was completely split from all the way. Oh, it was awful. That was a hard hit. But, after that, it kind of got this little reputation about it and, got questioned, ultimately ended up getting put in the shoe for it. And then where I was so big into lifting weights, where that was my thing. That was my life, my whole existence in there. Mackerel at the low security are money. Stamps are prison currency at the medium, but at the low security, mackerel are currency. Well, mackerel's the cheapest source of protein. So there's a guy, he's selling 120 mackerel for $80. Well, that sounds great. So I buy the mackerel from him. Turns out he's getting these mackerel by selling drugs. And I had my family put money on his books. They swear to God that I know everything about his drug dealing in the prison. And how it worked out was, the guy who I was getting the mackerel from, I'm still friends with him today. He's out, he's living his good life. But he's a Puerto Rican fellow, just saying that before I say this. The guard, the SIS guy, starts yelling at me, starts telling me he knows he did this, he knows he did that. I said, I got it from some other Puerto Rican. It wasn't even him. He said, "Oh, what do you look like?" I said, "I don't know. All you guys look alike to me." and yeah. And he told me he was sending me to Texas. So ultimately, he ends up putting me in a cell that's next to a mentally ill person that screams 20 hours a day. Now, I can't sleep. They're screaming all day, all night. And he tells me he's sending me to Texas. I was 2 months away from going to the camp. 2 months from going to the camp. And they're telling me, just tell on them, you can go back to the camp. You can go to the camp from here. We won't do anything. I had 11 points. I had 11 points. They leave me in the SHU for 87 days, and then they let me out at the medium. They just put a manageable variable on me, which is basically like, we can do whatever we want to.
Let's talk about that now. Now they send you over to the FCI. You're at the medium. You said, 40% of the people over there are SOs, right? Or what people call chomos in prison. What ends up happening with them dudes? Are they, because I've been in a prison. I was in Lexington my last 9 months where they were robbing these dudes, bro. They would get dollies and take their whole lockers at night when they were sleeping, like take everything they got. How was it over there?
It was the most insane thing on the planet. And see, at the low security, there is relatively no violence. Like, I mean, there's fist fights, but there's nobody gets stabbed. Nobody gets hit with a lock on a sock, anything like that. So I was worried about what type of violence goes on over there. So my first day in there, I put my chair against the wall because I figure I'm not in anybody's spot. That's good. A 350-pound freak show of a guy puts his chair right beside mine, and I look over. I see him look over at me, and after about 3 times of looking over and seeing him look over, he turns, "Hi, I'm Strawberry. Want to know why they call me Strawberry?" And I said, "I don't. I really don't." And that apparently the one spot that I chose to sit was where he put his chair every day against the wall in this lone spot. So that was my first mistake that I made. In Peel Line, I'm a clean-cut, clean-shaved guy. These people will approach and try anybody. Where I was clean-cut and I looked young, I mean, I hate to say it, but a lot of people thought that I was a sex offender because I was clean-cut. And, there's about 120 people in Peel Line over there, but did they get robbed? Yes. Did they get extorted? Yes. Did they get certain ones certain things happened to them? Yes. Certain ones got lent out for services by certain guys that would ultimately control them. And I went to education, learned not to use the bathroom. There's a guy, mean looking fella, standing outside the door, and I'm like, "Okay, you up next?" He's like, "You might want to go on." I'm like, "It's okay, I can wait." I had to take a leak. He said, "Fall back." And okay, and I walked up out of there. I learned that basically he was there was this person they called Wendy. Wendy, like Wendy's, the restaurant, the fast food, look kind of like Carrot Top. This guy would collect, for real, just like Carrot Top, before the muscles and all the fake muscles and stuff. But this guy would collect the money and send people in there with Carrot Top for services. And you saw that a good bit. That happened to a number of people. And when you put, the population has to be 40% in order for them to get funding for their program, is what you heard. So you heard everybody's story. But when you put that many deviants in one spot and they don't have an outlet, they do a lot of crazy stuff. The worst thing that really just messed with me the most was you'd see them passing around these things, these pictures, just like you'd have pictures of your family. They would pass them. Do what now?
Yard pictures?
Yeah, they called them fiend pictures there. But they, had pictures of actual adult stars, and the adult stars looked they were ones with braces. They were ones with, that were underdeveloped, and they were taken.
They're in there they're trading these pictures and having a good old time in there.
Yes, on Peter Beach is what they called it. Peter Beach was what they called the part of the yard. You wouldn't believe the stuff that, like, you wouldn't believe this place unless you saw it. Like, it was that absurd of a place. And literally every time at dinner, my wall in ARDAT, the drug program, was the only one that faced the actual yard. And you could see them trading these pictures as soon as they called rec move at dinner time. And they had binders and binders.
So the program that the taxpayer dollars are going for aren't really helping. These dudes, most of these dudes aren't trying to get better. I mean, they're just stuck in their sin, I guess.
They're not. And I want to tell you something else. There's one guy in there. We called him Yogi. Yogi has a bald head and a rat tail that come out of the middle of the crown of his head. He's just a white dude, just a normal. He's about 5'6", 170, but he's got this big round belly and these skinny tiny arms. He's probably about 55 years old. His thing, because you hear about everybody's story, in 3 different states, he would use the church as a means to find his victims. He would find a woman that he liked how the woman's kids looked, and he would get in a relationship with that woman. Then when he was in the house,
we're not gonna get into that stuff, man.
Yeah, but his boy in there, his boy that he got looked like a kid. So the sex offenders in there would find the younger sex offenders that had childlike qualities, and they would start relationships with them. So you see the same people doing the same stuff. I know they do that.
They were doing that stuff in Lexington too, man. Real deviant people, like you said. But anyway, man, let's talk about the part that I asked you about, though. Are people in there beating these dudes up? Are they stealing their stuff? I mean, are they taking advantage of them?
Yes. There's so many of them that they actually would like to believe that they had a gang. They actually had a shot caller who went by duct tape. I couldn't make this stuff up, but they're not going to do anything. And there was a guy in particular, and see, at this place, I called it the 6-month rule. Anybody can hide their habits, whether they're a gambler, a drug addict, a deviant. They can hide their habits for 6 months, but after 6 months, their true nature is going to come out. This guy who I was actually friends with, as were about 4 or 5 of us, just all of a sudden he went on a rampage, and he victimized probably a dozen people in the span of a 2-month period. Just went on a ramp, just out of nowhere. We all thought he was normal. He started making heart signs out the window at this dude that we called Janet Reno. And yeah, his real name was Toby.
Janet Reno?
This dude, I don't even know what Janet Reno looks like, to be honest with you. But he goes down, and it was really weird because he never went outside, this guy who went by Ghost. He went outside, and he goes to Janet Reno. He goes to Janet Reno's man, and he says, he's with me now. If you've got a problem with it, do something about it. That was number one, and that was the first, how it started. Then there was a guy that insulted him in the kitchen line. After he got home from work, he followed him back in the cell, got him. There was another guy whose tattoo he didn't finish. So that guy got an Aryan Brotherhood guy who went by Satan to finish his tattoo. And since Satan finished Ghost's original tattoo, he took that as an offense. He followed him in the cell. The guy was knotted up, and some other stuff happened in the cell. He did this to person after person. And it was probably 12 people in the span of 2 months. But even though the sex offenders, they were victimizing each other as much as the actual criminals, the regular inmates were, they're a whole different thing. I'm just trying to think how to say it.
I'm just going to say, this is a hell of an interview, buddy. I mean, we were going to talk about I was kind of doing like a couple things on the whole Dopesick thing this week, right? But you took us to old Peter Beach in Petersburg, Virginia, right? And wow, okay. But let's get out of prison now. How long you been free for?
Well, it's been 5 years, almost 5 years since I've been out of the halfway house. So almost 5.5 years.
Have you been clean the whole 5 years?
Yeah, I've been doing good. Been off heroin since April 9th, 2010.
What are you doing now with your life? I know you're talking at schools to kids. What are you doing?
I do talks at a number of different places. The most recent one was actually a pretty interesting. It was a retired teachers group, which I was like, oh, Jesus, I'm going to be talking to these senior citizens about my crazy stuff. But they actually were really cool about it. But yeah, kids, other people. I've been working with 2 writers for the past year on a book that we're going to be calling Surviving Dopesick, and it's basically going to be like a manual for parents. My mom always said there's no manual for what to do when your kid ends up on drugs. So I'm writing a manual. On top of that, I train jiu-jitsu and judo obsessively. I train twice a day, 2 hours a day. I'm pretty much one of the top students in the judo class, and jiu-jitsu, far from it, but I compete regularly. And because judo is mostly stand-up and jiu-jitsu is mostly groundwork, but in the competition, they have both of them, The judo has allowed me to take down all but one opponent in the last 3 competitions. I've got double gold at the last 2, and I lost the most recent one on points. But it's my obsession, you know.
Listen, man, we don't want you out here freestyling. We got to know, man, what's your record? Don't tell me it's 1-12.
I don't know how many wins I have total. I only have 1 loss. Well, I mean, in a competition, you compete sometimes 6, 7 times in one competition. So in the past, there's only been, I've only lost the most recent one, which was the biggest one. It was IBJJF Charlotte. But new breed, tap out cancer. 1 second.
1 second. He's going to go get the trophies. Let's see what he's got.
Here's a few of them. But yeah, and I've got pictures of it's been like when I was in prison, I watched Ryan Hall on TV, the UFC fighter. I've gotten to train with him since I've been out. Like everything that I watched, and I like it's been the coolest thing because like you make these plans when you're locked up, and so many people just abandon them. But I've got to do it.
What's up, man? I'm just joking with you. I'm in one of them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you had me laughing, but hey, man, look what prison got you, right? Got you into staying healthy. You got off drugs. You were scared to go to prison, so you start taking these self-defense classes, MMA classes, and now you're doing good things. So look, man, we've been on here a while, but before we close the show, because you do talk to kids, you do talk to people that, have struggled with addiction. What is your message today? We always give a message. What is yours?
The number one thing is, my situation is literally, my mom always told me, and this is something that I say to everybody, you are who your company is. And I never understood that. My company, allowing a drug dealer to live with me, I thought that was the most harmless thing on the planet. I thought, I'm just giving them a room. That could not cause me any harm or trouble. I'm not selling drugs in any way, shape, or form. It got me 8 years in federal prison. My friends were all flunkies, all addicts. So now, surround yourself with who you want to be like. I drive 2 hours each way, 4-hour round trip to North Carolina twice a week to stay the entire day to train jiu-jitsu with Paulo Santana. He's a world champion. I was released in the federal halfway house to Winston-Salem, so that's where I met him at. I drive an hour and a half to Lynchburg to box with Scott Sigmund. I'm lucky because judo is local, but I surround myself with the best martial artists that I can possibly find because that's what I want to be. If you are who your company is, I mean, I'm around killers in the gym every day. That's what I wanted to be. And I have 8 contacts in my phone. I don't use Facebook. I have a simple life, but it's a happy life. And I've learned what I am. I'm an addict. I'm one line away. I'm one shot away. I am one anything away from losing every single thing that I've accumulated. It's one away. Yard sale, everything be gone. Everything must go.
Listen, man, you're doing good things, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. You do have a YouTube channel, right? Tell the people what your YouTube channel is.
It's called the Dopesick Show. I can leave a comment on here for you. But yeah, it's got a picture of me. I'm actually like the nicest person ever, but it's a mean picture of me flexing. Yeah, it's a mean picture of me on there. It's that's a big part of it. Powerlifting, talk about powerlifting. I've got actual jiu-jitsu with my world champion coach, Paulo Santana, a few instructional videos on there, but a whole lot of stories of the freaky stuff that happened at Petersburg in depth, because it's a place that you would not believe that nobody else has talked about. And the staff actually cater to the sex offenders there. And that's something that I want to put out there too. And they let you know that if you do anything to them, you'll get a hate crime. Hate crimes are for ethnicities. They're not for sex offenders. I'm sorry, but sex offenders get no sympathy from me. But
well, listen, man, I definitely appreciate you. I'll tell people to go check out the Dopesick Show. Look, man, keep pushing, keep doing the right thing, man. I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to get ready to close the show. Tell people, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share the video. Check my boy out, my boy Seth. Spencer. Check him out on the Dopesick Show. With respect, Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out.